Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
We saw, as we've discussed, the challenger winning in the runoff, but I want to go back for just a moment to that first election and the forum that we televised and then went online with here at Big Country homepage after the debate or forum with the candidates. It was yourself and a Professor Durbin from Abilene Christian University.
No, from McMurray.
Oh, really? I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was an adjunct professor at McMurray, yes.
Apologize. Well, you guys did fantastic.
Thank you.
I was glued to that online, both on air and the forum, and then your conversation online. I want to just read something you said.
Okay.
You said on air after the forum because Cynthia Alvidrez didn't show up for the debate.
Right.
She, in fact, I think alerted the news staff that she would not be there just like half hour before the debate began.
Exactly. I walked in to the debate and found out, everybody just found out at that moment.
You said, well, when she backs out, she loses an opportunity to either cement her reputation, further introduce herself to new voters, or change the reputation that she might have had with voters because she had run previously.
Right.
You said, I don't want to be harsh or anything like that, but we're talking about people who are going to represent the city, represent the voters, and it's very hard. We're a city of 125,000 people to get in front of all those voters, and here's the opportunity to do it, and she chose to step away from that. And yet, isn't it fascinating that she's the one who, in a sense, gives us Miguel Espinoza as a new city councilman?
Exactly.
What do you think about all of that?
I think it's ironic. I think it's funny. I think in a certain sense it's predictable. All this happened. If you're not going to participate, you are saying, I'm happy with the voters I have. And then when you don't win, you don't finish second, you don't go to the runoff, in essence, you're telling your voters, oh, well. And the other candidates then have to go to your voters, and that's really hard to do. So you can make the argument, as you're making, that she actually created the conditions for Miguel to win. And I think that's a logical conclusion to draw.
And so a lot of this is speculative, but a lot of politics is. I mean,
Oh, you better believe it.
Politics is,
Yeah.
Hedging your thoughts and averages and tendencies and bets and trying to figure out what people are looking for. And
Right.
ultimately, the goal of politics is to win elections.
Exactly.
So here we are.
Right.
But I'm going to go ahead and speculate and ask you to talk about it. If Kyle McAlister had been on council for 12 years, which we know he had, it seems to me that he could be considered an establishment guy.
Yes.
The establishment, the political establishment in Abilene, like Kyle McAlister. Miguel Espinoza is an outsider coming in. And yet, there was no flashpoint for this election. There was no hot topic issue for this election. And yet, here we are. The establishment guy is no longer, and the outsider is now sitting on the council, or soon will be when he's sworn in.
When he's sworn in.
So, again, how do you account for that?
And you're asking the correct question, and I've thought about it, and other people have thought about it. I've talked about it with people. I want to disagree with one thing you said, where you said that Kyle is the establishment candidate, because if you go and you look at the fundraising numbers that the candidates reported, and everybody who's running for city council has to report how much money they spent and how much they raised. And Kyle McAlister's numbers were fine, but what was interesting was Miguel Espinoza's numbers. He outraised Kyle by thousands of dollars, and he also got money from people that we would consider establishment. Think about Scott Deezer, the head of First Financial Bank, or Scott Center of Center Realty. The realtors, in fact, gave $7,500 to Miguel Espinoza. So it's like, is in fact Kyle no longer the establishment candidate. And certainly there are people who we would consider the establishment, like Jane Beard, Nancy Lyles, who gave money to Kyle.
And at least in Jane Varner Beard's case, my understanding is she publicly questioned some of Espinoza's funding in her social media space, inferring that somehow he was being supported by somebody from outside the city or something. In other words, she went the further, not only to donate to Mr. McAlister, but she engaged in the political conversations online, heavily leaning toward Mr. McAlister. I don't know. I don't mean to be surprising you in any way, but it's my understanding.
You're absolutely correct. And then on top of that, voters who had not voted yet apparently received a letter on Friday or Saturday that took much of that same attack, if you will, that Jane Beard had launched against Miguel Espinoza, and it was put in the form of a letter from two citizens here, a couple here in Abilene. Now, I had voted in early voting, so I never received the letter. I've only heard about it, but today I was at lunch with the guy who got that letter.
I got it. If I still have it, I'll get my copy to you just so you have it for your files.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Yeah.
And so what we got here was actually the establishment against the establishment, with a new candidate, Miguel Espinoza, having support from some of the establishment, and Kyle losing support from some of the establishment. And the question is, why did this happen? And that I don't have an answer for.
Well, and I realize you just said that, but I'm going to ask the question anyway.
Please.
But I will clarify. I did get the letter. My wife and I did vote on election day. Typically, we'll vote early, but this time we didn't or forgot, and so we voted on election day. We got the letter. I will tell you that it seems to me to just still be a very interesting and compelling set of dynamics here, and so I want to ask you why. I want to ask you why this happened. But you have a candidate who had been on the council for 12 years, and a very young man who, until very recently, I don't think he'd even voted in a local municipal election.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So, again, I know you said I don't know why, but why? What do you speculate? What do you think? Is this a change election for our local city council, or is it just an anomaly, an interesting conversation, a point of political curiosity, and we all need to just realize those things happen from time to time?
Yes, and yes, and yes to all the things you said. There's a bunch of different ways I think we can look at this.
Well, we've got time.
So let's go through them. Number one, Kyle is a controversial candidate because of things he did in the past.
6 years ago, the censure vote, the social media posts. Yes, in fact, he appeared on this podcast and we talked. He was very transparent about it.
Oh, yes. When I had my radio show, I had him on and we talked through the things that he said. He was incredibly apologetic. He was working to try to overcome the image that had been created about him and his attitude towards Hispanics.
So is it your idea that finally caught up to him? Because he was running against a man of Mexican descent.
Right. I'm not sure it caught up to him, but it was always a part of him. So in other words, when you look at someone, their history is a part of them. Can you separate that from him?
Interesting.
And so I'm wondering if that was in the calculations, but again, I don't know.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
I don't know if you've ever done it before, if you have a history in it. You did it because he was your friend, but you were the campaign manager for one Mr. Miguel Espinoza, who just won a runoff against longtime incumbent Kyle McAlister. And so now the candidate that you helped organize his campaign, he's the winner. He's the new councilman.
Yes, he is.
Have you been in local politics before? Have you been a campaign organizer before?
I really have been. I started like 30-something years ago with a young lady that ran for county commissioner, and that was probably in the early 90s. And I was involved in that. I've been campaign chair for a couple of judges, and then I've been involved in city elections for a long, long time, but not at this level. And we really tried to get someone else to do it, to have a consultant, and it just didn't work out. And so I told Miguel, I said, we got to get this done. The thing with Miguel Espinoza is he grew up down the street from where my wife and I live. We built a house here in Wildlife Trails about 11 years ago. And I met Miguel really when he was in high school, and I was so extremely impressed with the young man.
He seems to be a pretty well put together guy, and I think if memory serves me right, and I mean I've certainly visited with him here in the Abilene People podcast series, but maybe it's from that or reading about him. You would know he played football at Abilene High.
Yes, he did,
and I think he was a nose guard, and I think that he even won all district. Or
I'm sure that's correct.
He was
pretty much of a stud.
Yeah,
but he was a stud, but he's one that was calm and disciplined in studying and doing all of that stuff. And so, yeah, and I think, Danny, I believe this to be the case, that I have been telling Miguel really for several years that you need to run for city council. And I would say we have not had a Hispanic member of the city council, and I say probably about 20-something years.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes. And so I kept saying, even just years ago, I said, you need to be a city council person. You really do. And you have a lot to add. And so I think maybe I convinced him. But what was hilarious was several months ago when we really started making the rounds, I said, Miguel, it's not going to be an easy thing going against an incumbent. And I said, you have to make the decision for yourself. I can't make it for you. No one else can make it for you. You've got to make a decision. Or are you going to do this? And he said, yeah, I'm going to do this.
So, the cynic would say, well, gee whiz, why does a guy need to be a candidate simply because he's a Latino, because he has Mexican heritage? Well, obviously, with this individual, that's not the only case. He brings a lot to the table. But that is important, I believe, and I think you do. Well,
I do. I do. I know, in fact, that Abilene is 27% Hispanic. And I've always felt like that on our city council that we need a good cross-section of Abilene, and everybody needs to have a voice, and everybody needs to be represented, and that's what I've always thought about Miguel, that he would be a great candidate for city council, and so we just started doing it.
And neither you nor I are experts in any of these fields. I don't know that you or I are experts in anything.
No,
really.
Maybe you, but not me.
But certainly not me. Maybe
Jack
you.
Of all trades.
But master of none. But
yes.
Here's the thing: when we talk about these things, it's I go to the conversations we've had recently on our national stage about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah. And here's what I've thought. Some of the conversations have really missed the mark. DEI is just a way to get somebody in the door. From that point, they have to prove themselves.
Absolutely.
So if you run into a Hispanic physician who went through the rigors of medical school and then their residency, and now they're practicing medicine, you can rest assured they may have had an opportunity at one time because some medical school said, we really would like to have a Latino or a Latina in our student body. Boy, from that point forward, they had to prove it. Okay, so the same thing would be about this young man who's now going to sit on our city council.
Yes.
Now, can he prove it? What do you think? Will he do a good job?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely he will. And I know his history. I know how he grew up. I know everything about him. And he is he's very intentional on everything he does. He was the one, Danny, that would have to, reel me in at times, because I'm a very passion-filled, very, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, you're an emotional guy.
Yes, I am. Let's defend our candidacy wherever we have to. And he was always one to say, okay, Tim, just, kind of chill out. But yes, he will, he is one of those that will read the packet, intensely. He will be prepared. He's always been prepared, Danny, always has been prepared. And that's why I have been so impressed with him over the last 10 or 15 years. That
seems to be just a really sharp.
All right, thank you, Danny. You can watch both of those full conversations on bigcountryhomepage.com under podcast.